umatendar dito'y roadshow. As mentioned by Secretary Andanar, this PCO roadshow will be a year-long roadshow for the government to explain the different policies, programs, and projects of the PCO and the Duterte administration. And this is our third stop, our first stop in North Luzon. The first was in Davao City, a month ago, and then afterwards, last week, we went to Zamboanga. But amongst the three, this is the most number of attendees, and I'd like to give a hand to Director Helen Tibaldo and Assistant Secretary Marie Rafael Banaag, who hails from the Cordillera region. Thank you very much, Asek Marie. I think each and every one of us from the PCOO, I'm sure Secretary Andanar would also agree, we are all overwhelmed by the attendance this morning, and we hope your morning will not be wasted because you will learn a lot from us, and we will give you an opportunity for you guys to ask us. So, nabit lang dito yung mensahe apo kasi adu pa nga dagiti na dumaduma pa nga speech. So my talk for this morning for the next 15 minutes is on freedom of information. Amuyo apo kat it's been almost 30 years that the Philippines, our legislators have fought for freedom of information, starting with Senator Raul Roco back in 1987, and still we do not have a law or program on freedom of information. And yet, without even Congress convening, President Duterte signed Executive Order number 2, empowering all national government agencies to have freedom of information. And so we have to give a big hand to President Duterte. Let's give a big hand, especially those of you coming from the media who fought for access to information. As you can see on your screens, our topic for this morning is EO number 2, which is the Executive Order on Freedom of Information in the Executive Branch. It does not include Congress, it does not include the Judiciary, it does not include the Constitutional Commission, and unfortunately, it does not require LGUs. It only, however, recommends it. So I hope our mayors, vice mayors, our provincial board members who are present this morning will take the cudgels for their provinces, their cities, and towns and file an FOI ordinance and be the first local government unit who would grant access to information until we have a law. This is back in November 25, which is the official rollout of FOI. All right, what access to information is anything that is in possession and in custody of a national government agency must be disclosed to the public. This is the general rule. Of course, there are exceptions. No? There are exceptions because there is national security concerns, there are privacy concerns, there must be exceptions. But the general rule is if the government agency has it, then they must disclose it. All right, this slide talks about who FOI is for. A lot of people will say that FOI is only for the media, for the journalist, for the press, for the researcher, for the student. And we at the PCOO say no. FOI is for everyone. FOI is for all. Why? We learned in other countries, FOI was pushed not by the media, but FOI was pushed by families. In the US and in Australia, for example, families used freedom of information to ask government about information on educational data, crime statistics. They asked for this information in order for them to make a better decision on whether to relocate to a state, relocate to another city. They accessed Department of Education statistics to learn where to bring their kids to school. And so I hope here in the Philippines, in Baugio, in Cordillera, you will use FOI for the same, to make better decisions. People say, ang FOI po ba nakakain? Hindi po nakakain ang FOI. Pero maaaring gamitin ang FOI para maghanap ng kung saan pwede kumain at paano kumain. Which leads me to my third sector. The third sector is, in other countries, FOI was pushed by the people themselves, ordinary people, civil society organizations, human rights groups. In India, for example, the major driver of FOI for the ordinary people. Dagiti maralita, hindi ko alam anong maralita sa Ilocano the poor, and they used FOI to ask what are the different government subsidies, different forms of financial support from government. Very similar to the Philippines, in India, this is the problem. The problem was there are so many forms of government support, conditional cash transfer, scholarships, so on and so forth. However, for one reason or another, that type of information is not cascaded down to the grassroots. Only a few people know, maybe because government media is limited in spreading the news, maybe these agencies don't want to spread the information and have a culture of favoritism. I worked in local government before, and sometimes we have this culture in government and local government that we only give out support to those people we know. In India, that practice had to stop. And they used FOI to access from the SWD, from DepEd, what are our government scholarships? Baka qualified naman ako. What are the requirements for conditional cash transfer and other forms of government support? Baka pwede naman ako mag-apply. And with FOI, agencies were required, they were obligated, duty-bound to release that information. FOI is also for business. I don't need to advocate that. Even without FOI, businesses will seek information. And last but not least, there are many NGAs, many local officials present right now. FOI is for you. FOI is for government employees who before was not given the time or day of other government agencies. How many times have we asked for information from a counterpart agency and they did not reply to us? Some agencies would take 30 days, some would take 1 week, others would take months. Sometimes they won't even respond to you. Dingami na po. Unless you are an undersecretary, an executive director, a regional director, a congressman, a governor, hindi ka papansinin ng gobyerno. Now, with FOI, it seeks to level the playing field. Whether you are an entry-level fireman, as I can see our colleagues from the BFP here, or an undersecretary, secretary, governor, senator, the policy gives you the same amount of time. It is a great equalizer. You are given 15 working days. Regardless of your social status, your rank in government, all of us are given 15 working days. And that's a great equalizer. Agpalakpak kaya po, narigat nga sa auditoy sanguyo. De, joke lang. It's all right. I'd like to digress, no? Is freedom of information, access to information new? No, it is not new. Prior to the executive order, government agencies have been giving information and people have been asking for information. The only thing different is through the vision of President Duterte and Secretary Andanao, there is now a minimum standard. 15 working days, extendable by 20 working days. There is a requirement for government agencies to publish the contact information of their FOI receiving officer. There is a schedule of fees. There is an appeals mechanism. There are minimum standards. All right, so each agency was required by the executive order to produce their own people's FOI manual. There is no one singular implementing rules or regulations or IRR. None. Each agency is required to produce an FOI manual. I'll ask my staff to bring me a copy. Shana, can you give me a copy of an FOI manual? And so if you're the DBM, you are the DICT, you're the DTI, your agencies have an FOI manual. And most of them are uploaded on our website. Our website is, please write it down, www.foi.gov.ph. All right, so as I mentioned, the executive order at least gives a standard on who to contact, who the receiving officer is, what's the process, what are the standard forms, the process of appeals, and the schedule of fees. There is no payment for asking information. Government agencies cannot impose fees to ask for information, but agencies may impose reasonable fees for photocopying expense, delivery expense, printing expense. But to ask information, they cannot impose a fee. This is our standard FOI request form. Again, it's also downloadable on our website. I see some of you have copies of the FOI manual. When you entered, I hope you have a copy of that manual. The process flow is very simple. It should be very simple to ask information from government. A requestor can go to the DTI here in Baguio City and ask for information about processes on how to register as a small, medium, barangay microbusiness enterprise. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is our FOI manual. This is a model FOI manual. Okay? Not all agencies have their own FOI manual. We have 70% compliance amongst national government agencies and GOCCs. That's pretty good. Amongst line agencies or departments, 100% compliance. All departments have their FOI manuals. You have some GOCCs without an FOI manual. In order not to defeat the purpose of the policy, the PCO produced a model FOI manual. If the agency you are asking information from does not have a manual, then you can use the PCO model FOI manual to seek your information. Okay, so our requester goes to a receiving officer. The receiving officer is not a new employee of the government. It is an added task. So this could be your records office, your public affairs office, your legal office. It depends on